Title: What 8 books say about progress, energy, and climate, without the panic. Most people believe the world is getting worse. Poverty, hunger, disasters, a climate about to collapse, resources running out. If that picture were an exam, Hans Rosling argued, most of us would fail. Not because we are stupid, because the human mind is built for drama. Rosling's book, Factfulness, starts in a strange place. He gave educated adults a simple quiz about the state of the world. Extreme poverty, vaccination, literacy, life expectancy, girls in school. People did worse than chimpanzees picking at random. And the errors all pointed the same way. They thought the world was poorer, sicker, and more hopeless than the data show. That is the starting point of this video. Not the thermometer, the way we look. Rosling named 10 instincts that distort the picture. The gap instinct. We split the planet into rich and poor and imagine a canyon between them. Most of humanity now lives in the middle. The negativity instinct. A plane crash is news. 40,000 safe landings are not. Gradual improvement almost never earns a headline. The straight line instinct. If a curve is rising, we assume it will rise forever. That is how people misread population. Fertility falls when child deaths fall and women get education. The line bends. The fear instinct. We overestimate sudden, visible, violent risks and underestimate slow, familiar ones. Disease, indoor smoke, energy poverty, cold. The size instinct. A large number with no denominator looks like a crisis. Then generalization, destiny, single cause, blame, and urgency. Act now or it is too late is a great slogan. It is a poor way to compare policies that cost trillions. Matt Ridley, in The Rational Optimist, adds something historians notice and intellectuals often forget. Pessimism sounds serious. Optimism sounds naive. That bias shapes newsrooms, universities, NGOs, and politics. Patrick Moore calls many modern scares invisible catastrophes. Carbon dioxide, ocean chemistry, polar bears far away, a patch of plastic in the middle of the Pacific. You cannot check them with your own eyes. You have to trust intermediaries. Activists, reporters, politicians, some scientists. When the threat is invisible, the story can replace the observation. Michael Shellenberger, who comes from environmentalism, makes a harder point. Alarm does not only distort, it can block the very tools that work. If nuclear is treated as a sin, if gas as a bridge is treated as betrayal, if high-yield farming is treated as violence against the earth, panic does not produce solutions. It produces guilt and ritual. So the first lesson from these books is not, relax, nothing is wrong. It is, your first impression of the world is probably too dark, too binary, and too urgent to be a good map. Now zoom out. Not 10 years, 200. Ridley says that for most of human history, life was short, diets were thin, and local inventions died with the village that made them. What changed the species was not only a larger brain, it was exchange. When two groups trade, they do not only swap objects, they swap recipes. Ideas recombine. Ridley's phrase is famous. Ideas have sex. Isolated societies can forget technologies. Trading networks accumulate them. Self-sufficiency sounds virtuous. In history, it is often another word for poverty. That is the engine. Specialization. Trade. Ideas meeting other ideas. Cities, routes, property that is imperfect but real. And competition. On that engine sit the long series that Rosling popularized and that Ridley, Tupy, and Pooley and Shellenberger keep citing. Extreme poverty has fallen sharply since 1990. Most people are no longer on Rosling's lowest income level. Child and maternal deaths collapsed, where vaccines, sanitation, antibiotics, and skilled birth arrived. Life expectancy doubled in many countries over a century and a half. Chronic hunger fell as a share of a much larger world population. Literacy and girls' schooling rose fast. Deaths from natural disasters, once you adjust for population and often for wealth, fell dramatically from the early 20th century. Not because weather became kind, because of warnings, stronger buildings, levees, medicine, and roads. None of that erases present suffering. Hundreds of millions still lack reliable electricity or safe water. The optimistic reading is not, "the job is done." It is, "the method that worked should be extended, not abandoned." Then comes the resource question. The old Malthusian story is simple. More people, fewer resources per head, collapse. Julian Simon answered that people are the minds that invent substitutes. Marian Tupy and Gale Pooley in Superabundance tried to measure that claim with a tool called the time price. A money price lies. Gasoline can cost more than in 1970 and still be cheaper if wages rose faster. Time price is the nominal price divided by nominal hourly income. It asks a human question. How many minutes must I work to buy this? Their central result? Between 1980 and the late 2010s, world population grew by roughly 70 to 75%. The time price of a wide basket of commodities, food, metals, energy, fell by a similar order, or more. An hour of work bought several times more of that basket than 4 decades earlier. When personal abundance grows faster than population, they call it superabundance. In the datasets they study, that pattern is common, not rare. Over still longer spans, time prices tend to fall as knowledge compounds. The philosophical claim is sharp. The resource that matters is not the ton in the ground, it is the ton that knowledge can reach. Oil was useless until distillation and engines existed. Be precise. Time prices do not measure unpriced pollution or a forest cut in one valley. They measure market goods. They are an argument against, "we are running out of stuff." They are not a license to ignore dirty air. Which brings us to energy and to Alex Epstein. Epstein says the debate is framed wrong. The usual question is, how do we eliminate human impact? His question is, which energy improves human life? If the moral standard is untouched nature, industry is almost always a crime. If the standard is human life, years lived, winter heat, summer cooling, hospitals, tractors, fertilizer, refrigerated food, then cheap, dense, reliable energy is a primary good, not a vice. He asks for 3 things at once. First, count the benefits of coal, oil, and gas, not only the side effects. Without them, there is no industrial civilization at the present scale. Second, count climate mastery. Dikes, irrigation, forecasts, heating, air conditioning, cold chains. Those systems run on dense energy. They are why disaster deaths fell even as more people moved into harm's way. Third, measure climate effects with numbers, not metaphors. A degree of warming is not the end. You have to add damages, adaptation, and possible benefits, longer growing seasons in some latitudes, and the fact that in many countries, cold still kills more people than heat. Epstein and Shellenberger underline a pattern. Life expectancy and income exploded in parallel with mass fossil use. Proven reserves kept rising because technology finds and unlocks more. In rich cities, air pollution fell while energy use rose, because wealth pays for filters and for replacing dirty coal with gas. Why not just switch to sun and wind tomorrow? Their answer is systems, not slogans. The price of a kilowatt hour at noon on a windy day is not the cost of keeping a hospital on at 2 a.m. in January. Intermittent sources need backup. Today, usually gas or coal, plus grids, storage, and extra capacity. Biomass at scale competes with farmland. Renewables use a lot of land per unit of energy. Land is also habitat. Shellenberger turns that into a heretical environmental argument. If you want to give land back to nature, intensify. High-yield farms, cities, dense electricity, especially nuclear. Environmentalism that shuts nuclear plants and preaches degrowth can end up using more landscape per calorie and per kilowatt. Moore, a co-founder of Greenpeace, who later broke with the movement, defends nuclear on a grim but useful metric. Deaths per terawatt-hour are very low. Fear of nuclear, he argues, is out of proportion to the risk next to dams, coal, or traffic. The moral close in this school of thought is blunt. Telling a country that still cooks on wood and dung to skip the fuels that built the West is not planetary virtue. It is blocking the first rung of development. Energy poverty is a crisis now, not a scenario for 2100. On climate itself, these 8 books are not one voice. That matters. Do not flatten them into a single denial block. Lomborg and Shellenberger accept that the planet has warmed, that human carbon dioxide is the main driver of recent warming, and that doing nothing intelligent has costs. They reject apocalypse as a useful frame. Lomborg, in False Alarm, translates the issue into economics. Even with substantial warming, the damage models he uses point to a loss of a few percentage points of world GDP by 2100, against a world several times richer. Panic, he argues, spends trillions on cuts that move tenths of a degree and crowds out vaccines, nutrition, malaria control, and energy research. The Paris Agreement, in his arithmetic, is symbolically loud and physically shy. His package is not do nothing. It is a moderate, rising carbon tax, a lot more research so clean energy beats coal on price, and serious adaptation. Wrightstone and Moore go further, and this is the most contested part of the set. Wrightstone stresses that water vapor is the dominant greenhouse gas by magnitude, that carbon dioxide's warming effect is logarithmic, so each extra molecule does less than the last, that CO2 is plant food, that satellite greening and record harvests owe something to fertilization, longer seasons, and fossil-derived fertilizer, that Earth has been warmer in the past, that cold still kills more people than heat, and that many extremes, once adjusted, do not match the popular escalation. Moore adds that more than 400 parts per million is still a trace gas, that calling CO2 a pollutant confuses the chemistry of life with soot, and that several icons, acidifying oceans as an existential threat, coral bleaching as final death, and imminent mass extinction, rest on weaker evidence than the posters suggest. Be honest here. The IPCC and most working climate scientists do not sign that package. They assign carbon dioxide the main role in recent forcing, and they warn that risks rise sharply above 2 or 3 degrees. Including Wrightstone and Moore is how you hear the counter-argument these books make. It is not a claim that the argument has won. Where almost all of these authors do agree is about climate as news. Headlines pick the worst scenario. IPCC summaries are drier than the front page. Blaming every fire and hurricane on climate ignores the bullseye effect. More people and more capital sit in dangerous places. Adaptation has already cut death rates in a way few mitigation slogans can match. Per life saved. And carbon dioxide is not the only environmental problem. Local soot, sewage, overfishing, and habitat loss are concrete. They need engineering and institutions, not only a global temperature target. Moore's method is to open a case file. What is the claim? What can you observe? How much hangs on a model with extreme assumptions? Who gains money or status if the fear stays hot? Polar bears. Ice in summer has declined. Counts, they say, rose from mid-century lows when hunting was the main threat. Less ice is not the same sentence as imminent extinction of the species. Corals. Bleaching is real and tied to heat spikes. Recovery also happens. Corals live across a wide temperature range. Mass extinction. Shellenberger attacks the old species area model that spat out enormous numbers that were not then observed. Island extinctions, invasives, and hunting are real. A Hollywood Holocene wipeout is a different claim. The Pacific Garbage Island. Not a solid continent you can see from space, they argue, but a dispersed soup, much of it lost fishing gear. Plastic is a waste problem. A mythical island is a better poster. Forests. Temperate cover has grown in many countries. Satellites show greening, partly from abandoned farmland, plantations, and CO2. Tropical clearing remains a real, local fight. The Earth is running out of trees mixes two maps. Then, the graveyard of predictions. Oil gone in the 1970s. Global famine on Ehrlich's timetable. Arctic ice dates that have already passed. A record of misses does not prove the next risk is fake. It proves that date plus catastrophe plus moral duty has been a bad forecasting genre and a good mobilization machine. If climate is one problem among several, money is finite. Lomborg's harsh question is, lives saved per dollar. An expensive climate policy in a poor country for a fraction of a degree in 2100 can kill by omission. Fewer clinics, fewer wires, dirtier indoor air. The policy portfolio these books roughly share looks like this. Development first. Leaving energy poverty lowers fertility, cuts wood smoke, and makes people less fragile in storms. Dense energy. Nuclear at scale. Gas where it replaces coal. Research on storage and other power you can turn on when you need it. Innovation, not only rationing. The prize is clean energy cheaper than coal in Lagos and Karakter, not only turbines in Denmark. Adaptation as policy, not surrender. It is what already worked. Concrete local environmental work. Particles, dumping, illegal fishing, parks that are actually managed, and a refusal to treat degrowth as a universal ethic. Ridley and Epstein read that ethic as a luxury of people who already burned fossils for a century. They do not close every file. Tail risk remains. So do possible tipping points the IPCC discusses. So does fairness between past emitters and countries industrializing now. 8 books do not finish climate physics. They finish a critique of how we talk, spend, and scare. If you compress them into a method, it is this. Start with your instincts, not the thumbnail. Look at long series, not one summer. Use a human standard. Years of life, health, freedom, electricity. Separate a real problem from an apocalyptic plot. If the threat is invisible, demand evidence you can inspect. Prioritize what has already worked. Wealth, warnings, buildings, vaccines, fertilizer, grids, and nuclear where it is viable. The thread is not, nothing is happening to the climate. The thread is this. Human beings are not a virus on a sacred body. They are a species that learned to trade, to master a hostile environment, and to produce abundance. That power has costs. Denying the power in order to feel pure, these books say, is the luxury that helps no one who still lives in the dark.